Hi, everyone. I'm the director for our New Zealand registered not-for-profit called Common Knowledge. And we are privileged to hold all of the skills that hundreds of fathers and mothers and myself developed in the early 1970s to prepare our body for childbirth and the skills to cope and manage, work through, work together as we go through the activity of birthing our baby. And this is what's amazing to me 50 years later because I've actually lived through three childbirth trends. One of them was in the United States. Second one was in the United States. The third one was both in the United States and New Zealand because childbirth became global sometime when the second childbirth trend was put in place. And so, how are we doing today? Not very well in childbirth. And why is that? Because we've been on the wrong mission in the wrong manner, and we need to re-envision childbirth. And that's what our trust wants you to understand. We want to put in place a concept to re-envision childbirth. Simple concept, one that you can repeat easily to yourself or others, that when you're pregnant, it's just normal and natural to learn some birth and birth coaching skills, and then use those skills to do the activity of birthing your baby. No matter where birth occurs, who's present, your circumstances or beliefs, your choices, lack of choices, change of choices, or what happens to or around you at birth. And this is really important because 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. And women do the birth by themselves, one way or the other. And so how have we been treating birth? Well, when I gave birth in 1970, the very first childbirth preparation classes were taught. There was a very high societal expectation we all attend, and they were all skills, Lamaze and Bradley. Sadly, they were not focused on 100% of us. They were focused only on low-risk women. And sadly, they weren't focused on us being able to do the activity better. It was focused on achieving a goal of a natural birth, in which the word natural was never defined, pain-free labor, yeah, go for that, ladies, and with no medical care. So we had a problem. Not enough low-risk women even achieved those goals because those goals were undefined and very difficult to achieve. And so then in the 80s, all the childbirth classes shifted over to information because it began to be a choice-based trend, which we're still in now, based on a belief that women know what kind of birth they want. They should just tell the care providers they're hiring their care providers. Care providers are delivering service to them. So they should just tell women, their care providers, midwives and obstetricians, the kind of birth they want. And the care providers should try to give them that birth or involve them in informed consent. Well, that's great, except that babies don't come to plan. There's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. So recently, very recently, 50 years, I have no interest in the politics of birth. I'm just very keen on all of us being skilled. So I've carried forward that concept that mothers and fathers asked me to carry forward, along with the skills they develop. But the concept's very broad. Just as normal and natural when you're pregnant, self-learn skills, and then use those skills to do the activity of birthing your baby. For goodness sake, you're going to be a parent. You got to be skilled to be a parent. Your baby's here now, even though you're pregnant. So be skilled to do this one-off, infrequent activity that's life-transforming. So we want this new concept to spread. We want to re-envision childbirth as a skills-based activity that we do. But I've been recently dragged into politics. It just makes me crabby. But I've been recently corresponding to somebody who's been involved in birth for many, 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 many years, as I have been. And this person has done it more from childbirth preparation or education. She's a wee bit younger, so she's been very invested in the choices that women will make. And she's very angry with the medical profession. But she gave me two very significant bits of the conversation that probably for 50 years I've never fully understood until she said it, which is she's frustrated that women seem to want to take no responsibility at all for their birth. Okay. And I've heard this a lot. Now, in the early 70s, when I and hundreds of fathers and mothers developed skills, I've always, not say it in a negative, I've always worked with skilled families. So every family I've ever worked with has become skilled because they want to use skills to work through the activity of birthing their baby, whether it's a cesarean or home alone, whether they're high risk, low risk, whether things don't come out the way they wanted, whatever, we just treat it as an activity and we get skilled to do the activity. So I have heard what she's saying for years and years and years by passionate birth advocates who believe that the average woman out there just doesn't take responsibility. So put that in one camp. The other camp, which she said, because part of the birthing better skills is how we prepare our body for birth. And these are skills that dads developed because they see birth from the outside. So when labor goes on and on and on, they see that. And they developed lots of skills around this. But one of the skills was just simple. Childbirth is an exercise in plumbing. You got a big object in a container. You can't change the shape of the object. Can you open up the container? And yes, we can. And we start at 24 weeks. That's when families self-learn the body skills. If they find the skills at 40 weeks, they're just more motivated. So, and it's not hard. It's our body. We sit on two bones. Everybody does. So if you can create more space and you can be softened on the inside, that helps this object come down through and out. So she gave two conflicts. On the one hand, women are lazy and don't take responsibility. On the other hand, she didn't believe that families should have skills to do something like create space. That should be done by a professional. So you understand where that's a conflict. If you say to people you should be skilled, on the other hand, you say you can't be skilled, then people are going to be lazy. So I'm going to read you some stories. So one is, why has there been so much reluctance because in the 60s and the 70s in the U.S., everybody took Lamaze and Bradley. So there was no reluctance for us to be skilled. Not always the greatest skills. They didn't adjust. They didn't adapt. They weren't sustainable. Birthing Better is very different because we grew up at that time and we're taking a look at what was and wasn't working. So we developed skills that are very broad, but fill in all of the gaps that anybody had. And it took us 15 years to really develop the extensiveness of the skills. They're not hard to learn. Okay, like, for example, if you hate birth, you can still manage well. So there's an ebook on positive and negative voice in your own head. This isn't rocket science, but there is no perception that people should be skilled. It's all, you know what kind of birth you want, make a birth plan, expect them to give it to you. So why don't we have skills? What's the symbolic issue of that? And I ran into this book, okay? It's called Voices in the Stones, right, by Kent Nurburn. And he's talking about Native Americans. And this is true of all of the traditional communities. If I was in Peru and I was in the middle of nowhere, but I was at a family restaurant, the 6-year-old would clean the table, but never bring hot food. The 8-year-old would bring the hot food, but never handle the money. The 12 or 13-year-old would handle the money, but they wouldn't cook, right? So there was always an appropriate skill for the appropriate age. So when you're pregnant, you're an adult. And after your baby's born, you're going to be a mother or father. So why are we, and it's mostly women doing this to each other, because men are just going to follow along at a certain level, why is we, and those so passionate about birth, been so resistant to a belief that we, 100% of pregnant women, have to do an activity to get our babies out to become a parent and theoretically skilled as a parent? Why do we believe as women that we shouldn't be skilled to birth our baby? It's beyond me. It's been beyond me for 50 years. Right? It just seems common sense that something so infrequent, so life-transforming, can't replay it, that we shouldn't be skilled. So that's the concept. It just should be normal and natural, self-learned skills, and use them to birth your baby. So here's a quote about people, relationship within a community. Okay, and they say it from the viewpoint of a child, but you can say it from the viewpoint of a pregnant woman. So I'll just read it. Children were not treated as adults in waiting. They were given responsibilities that were theirs and theirs alone. Perhaps someone older could have done their tasks more quickly and efficiently, but speed and efficiency were not the point. The point was to give everyone a role, bound to their particular stage in life, that was theirs and theirs alone, and no one else was allowed to fulfill it. So, how do you say that for a pregnant woman? You and you alone at that stage in your life are going to do this phenomenally big activity of birthing your baby. And your societies, your modern societies, birth advocates, are telling you, yeah, it's a nothing burger. You do not need to be skilled to do this. And from our viewpoint as Birthing Better Families and our charitable trust, this is just nonsense. So we're asking you to re-envision birth. To which, here's another book, another story. This comes from a book called Awareness. Okay, and I live where there's a lot of book exchanges, so I just went in there, and it is a book on awareness and waking up, being aware, right? And so this is the first chapter. I only got that many pages, right? So this is a story from that first chapter. And it was such a pointed story that I decided that I had to do this video. So here's the story. Last year on TV, I heard a story about this gentleman who knocks on his son's door. Jamie, he says, wake up. And Jamie answers, I don't want to wake up, Papa. And the father shouts, get up, you have to go to school. And Jamie says, I don't want to go to school. Why not? Asks the father. 3 reasons, says Jamie. First, because it's so dull. Second, the kids tease me. And third, I hate school. And the father says, well, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you must go to school. First, because it's your duty. Second, because you're 45 years old. And third, because you are the headmaster. That's the end of the story. And then the author says, wake up, wake up. You've grown up. You're too big to be asleep. Wake up and stop playing with your toys. So how does this relate to childbirth? If we are looking at women are lazy and don't want to do anything, but they shouldn't do anything because they can't be skilled to do it, then we are putting ourselves as pregnant women and expectant fathers to sleep. And what Birthing Better Families have been saying for 50 years, and I agreed to carry this forward for some unknown reason, is wake up. You are grown up. You are the mother-to-be who has to do this activity. Get motivated. Just learn some skills. If you don't want to learn Birthing Better skills, fine. There's hypnobirthing, calm birth, birthing within, Lamaze, the Bradley method, Grantley Dick Reed. You may have others. There may be others in your country, but they have to be skills. So to top this off, this person who gave me this insight that women don't really want to do anything for themselves, and they shouldn't be doing anything for themselves really in this field, is a person who, and I would say tens and thousands of people, providers, people who provide service for pregnant women, and not so much pregnant women, because pregnant women get that they're going to have to do this, but advocates, particular advocates about birth, do not recognize the difference between choices and skills. They think women are using skills to make choices. They are. There's no doubt about it. We make a choice every time we get up in the morning as to what clothes we put on. Okay? So we make a choice of what clothes we put on. But to put the clothes on is a skill. We don't choose to put our pants on our arms. Okay? So we can have all the choices you want in birth. You just have to keep in mind that babies don't come to plan, and there's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. And of the tens and thousands of families that I've worked with, been around, listened to birth stories, maybe that many people of tens and thousands had a birth that they thought they were going to have. And all the rest of us, it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be, which means we still have to do the activity. And this is what's so important. If we don't have skills to do the activity, then we just let birth happen, and it will happen to us one way or another. So, what's the difference between choices and skills? Well, you can make a birth plan. I don't want to be induced. I don't mind if I have an epidural. I'd like music playing. I'd like my husband there and my sister there. I want to, be able to get up and walk around and to eat. Those are all choices. What are you going to do? What's your behaviors? What's going to happen when you have the next contraction? Or what are you going to do when somebody does something to you that's uncomfortable? What are you going to do? Doing. That's the activity. So, what are the areas for women to learn skills in and for fathers? From Birthing Better viewpoint, we share the same skills because we all blink, we all cough, and can tighten up our rectum. We all sit on those two bones, right? So we can share those skills, but from two viewpoints. I have to do the birth, or I'm going to be outside looking and hearing what the woman is doing. So one is good breathing skills that adapt, adjust, and are sustainable as this period of time of doing the birth takes place. And things change. Internal sensations change, and what happens to us changes. Relaxation, and not on the outside. It does not actually matter whether you relax on the outside. It may feel good to you, but it doesn't impact your baby. It's learning to soften, particularly if you're going to labor in a vaginal birth, soften inside your bony pelvis, have prepared inside the soft tissue of the birth canal. Yes, that's coming out. You can look at a chart of a pregnant belly. You can feel a pregnant belly. And look at a chart and you see this tiny thin tube. This is the vagina, right? And so women have this misunderstanding. The belly's big, baby's big, but between the top of the pelvis and when the head's out, it just squishes down into this tiny, tiny, tiny tube that fits into this two-dimensional drawing. And then when it comes out the vagina, it just sort of pops. But that's not true. That's coming down through your bony pelvis and through your vagina. So you have to prepare that area, your pelvis, the inside of your body. You have to know how to soften in there and prepare manually, touch, feel, relax, soften, massage the inside, all the inside of the birth canal. So breathing, relaxation, positions. We have a lot of charts about positions. But if you don't know, if you're laboring and you do not know whether the position you're in is backing off your labor so it's not progressive or making it progressive, then you are just choosing positions randomly. And if you're being told change positions frequently, you're not being told that it takes your baby 3 contractions to adjust to the internal changes when you change positions. You aren't taught that. So many of the positions that are being taught as the best gravity plus positions are positions that hinder labors. It's silly. We have to be able to link these two together. So if we have to find out what's a progressive birth, if we labor, then we have to know what a progressive birth is compared to a birth that isn't progressive. And that's where men were significant of seeing birth from the outside. So, for instance, and this is where it came from, women, when we talk about labor, if we're going to have a labor, we talk about a contraction. It's either not painful, kind of painful, sort of painful, a little bit painful, quite painful, very painful, really painful, and we lose it. That's why we use the word contraction. That's not what guys see. Guys see something starts, gets more intense, it either peaks or a plateau, and that's where it's important. It starts to go away and it goes away. So every contraction is 5 phases. It's much simpler to apply skills, breathing relaxation skills, to 5 phases than one thing. And the only one thing is determined on whether it's painful or not. So if you can apply skills to 4 out of 5 phases, then you can keep working through each of the 5 phases of every contraction in more control, feeling more in control. So you need those skills. You need the skills of what if you hate the experience and just want to you have to know that we have the capacity. Hate all you want. Hate everything. But that, it's like being a parent. You don't always like your kid, but you can't kill him just because you don't like him that day. You have to use skills. So, hate birth, apply your skills and keep saying to yourself, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. That's okay. But use your breathing, relaxation, positioning skills. How about teamwork? Skills that you work with your partner together so you feel understood. He or she understands you, and you help them help you. Is that worth it? So going back to the progression, sorry, skipped over something. So with the progression, what dads were saying was that if these 5 phases always had a peak, that the labor was progressive. It meant that the contractions got longer, stronger, more intense within an hour or two. They also saw that if it didn't reach a peak, if it just plateaued and dribbled off, that women could be doing that contraction for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. So that was a skill that we could learn and apply as we did the activity of birthing our baby. What about niggling labors or false labors or labors that don't get going? A lot of people in the natural birth movement say, get your labor going, stimulate your nipples, walk, take castor oil, have sex, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Why do you want to do that? That's as much of an intervention as anything else you're doing. What's the problem? If your body's taking time, your baby's taking time to flood it with hormones. So we learned a skill because that was a gap we felt. When women said, I was in labor 72 hours. Well, you look at her note, she was actually went from 3 centimeters to fully dilated in 7 hours. And most of that was irregular contractions that tired her out because she kept trying to get her labor going, or she wanted her labor to go in, or she didn't sleep, or she didn't rest. So we developed a skill, simple skill. Just ask yourself or get asked, what do you want to do now? Because the fact is you're not in active labor, right? So you got to do something, and sitting there waiting for it to happen just tires you. Isn't that a worthwhile skill to apply and constantly apply? When women and men apply that skill, they don't go into labor tired. They can still hate every 72 hours of that experience, honestly. So what other skills? What about back labor? Women have been telling each other since the 90s, press on your sacrum. Okay, guys, how's that working for that object inside? Is that closing off the space for the object that you're trying to make room for? Yes, it is. So why are we doing that? Why not learn to mobilize the sacrum instead, to give space at the top by tucking your tail between your legs? You can feel that open up. What if you then untuck your tail and point your bum more towards the wall by arching your back? That opens up the bottom part of your pelvis. How about having that skill? So, and Birthing Better has more skills. Why? Because everybody nitpicked the crap out of everything. And if it worked for one of us, it would work for the other, right? Positions. When I gave birth first, I was lying on my back with my feet up in stirrups. Lie on your back with your feet in stirrups. You might not be in a gravity position, but you're open down there. That's what your baby needs. Now sit in a semi-recumbent position where you're sitting back on your sacrum with your knees bent and feet on the floor. That's a preferred natural birth position, but feel how you close your sacrum. And that's the bone your baby needs to move out in order to come around your pubic bone to open up your vagina. No wonder so many women push until they break blood vessels in their eyes, because they're compressing the bone the baby needs to move. How are we doing? What about birth plans? So women don't want any medical care, but they go into the hospital. Well, duh. People in the hospital want to do the assessments, monitoring procedures. So you might find yourself having those assessments, monitoring procedures. So what do? Just throw up your hands and whine? And go, they abuse me. No, you're doing the activity of birthing your baby. Use your skills. That's what we learned. We had no choices in the 70s. We went into the hospital and had all that stuff done and more. We used our skills. And how did we feel? We didn't always like all that stuff. But boy, we felt empowered. and we had very little shame, blame, guilt, disappointment, anger, frustration, and birth trauma from feeling that we didn't get what we wanted. Choices and skills are different. We need to understand that. And it is time to re-envision childbirth. What's the concept? Repeat after me or with me. When you're pregnant, it is normal and natural to self-learn birth and birth coaching skills, and then use those skills to work through the activity of birthing your baby. Now, I should stop there, but of course, someone's going to raise their hand and say, yeah, but so many women are having cesareans. That's not really giving birth. It is giving birth. It is, that family is giving birth to their baby. Why should you evaluate someone else's birth? You don't evaluate anything else in their lives. So why have we given ourselves permission to go, natural birth at home is the right birth. The cesarean, that's not really a birth. No, it is a birth. It's a birth for that family. So how did birthing better families, or that concept, apply skills? Well, first of all, we're pregnant. We don't get pregnant often. So we just enjoy preparing our body for our baby's birth. It's fun. It's fun learning skills together. It brings us closer as a family. It's doing the work at that appropriate age. Remember what this said? What this said is the point is to give everyone a role bound to their particular stage of life that is theirs and theirs alone, and no one else can fulfill it. That is why when we're pregnant, even if we're having a cesarean, become skilled, because we are learning skills that we carry over into our parenting after the birth. It's just plain fun. And then, when does birth start as this cesarean? Well, packing your bags, going to the hospital. That takes time. So what skills can you use? Your breathing, your relaxation, your teamwork, your touch, your communication. You're being prepped in surgery. Just see it as an activity. It may change what it's doing, but it's still the activity you're doing. And you're doing it alone. And if you have somebody with you doing it with you, then work together. It builds intimacy. It builds capability. And it builds our awareness that this is the task that we are doing, and that we are doing it the best we can. Do we have to be perfect? No. But any skill is better than none. And so if someone says to you, well, I'm making choices, or I'm spinning my baby, that's a skill. You can spend 20 minutes spinning your baby. If your baby doesn't turn, where are you? You still have to do the activity. If your baby does turn, you can't guarantee turning that baby's going to make one bit of a difference to your birth, because you can't replay it. So at least spend 20 minutes a day then learning some skills so that you can work through your baby's birth. Okay, so you made a birth plan, you didn't get what you wanted? Well, most of us don't. Right? So it is what it is. Do the birth. Be skilled. So let's repeat one more time what the concept is. Okay? It's normal and natural when you're pregnant to self-learn some birth and birth coaching skills, and then use skills to work through the activity of birthing your baby. It's your baby. Be skilled. You'll always be glad you did. You'll never regret it. And you'll move into parenting feeling more confident. Okay, that's my rant for the day. We're re-envisioning childbirth. Thanks for listening.